The desert has a way of stripping a man bare, of his pride, his plans, even his sense of time. Out there, where the horizon trembles under the weight of heat and silence, you begin to learn who you truly are. I'd never planned to find myself stranded in the heart of Arizona, miles away from the nearest town, with nothing but a broken truck, a dying sun, and a canteen half full of warm water. But life, as I've come to learn, doesn't always ask for your permission before rewriting your story. It was supposed to be a quick trip, just a solitary drive through the back roads, a chance to clear my head after months of city chaos. I'd been drowning in noise, the honking, the deadlines, the endless meetings that felt like running in circles. I wanted silence. I wanted something real, so I took my old Ford and drove west, chasing the quiet. By mid-afternoon, the heat was punishing. The asphalt shimmered like liquid glass, and the air smelled of dust and iron. I'd been driving for hours when the engine coughed, sputtered and died, leaving me with a hiss of steam and a whole lot of regret. I stepped out, sweat running down my back, and kicked the tire like an idiot who thought that might help. It didn't. There was no cell service, no shade, just miles of desert and the soft hum of cicadas. I grabbed my canteen, locked the truck, and started walking toward the faint outline of distant cliffs. I figured there might be a riverbed or an old trail out that way. But the farther I went, the more unreal everything felt. The land seemed alive, breathing, watching. The wind whispered through the sagebrush like a voice just out of hearing range. That's when I saw her. At first I thought it was a trick of the heat, a shimmer in the air, maybe a mirage. But then I noticed movement, a faint twitch of a hand against the sand. My heart jumped. I ran closer and saw the figure of a young woman lying face down in the dirt. Her clothes were torn, her skin blistered from the sun. A dark trail of blood marked the sand beneath her arm. "Hey, hey," I called out, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" No response. I turned her gently onto her back. Her face was streaked with dust and tears. She looked maybe 20, maybe younger. Her hair was long and black, braided with beads and small feathers, though most of them were tangled and broken. Her lips were cracked and dry. I unscrewed my canteen and held it to her lips. "Easy. Here, drink." Her eyes fluttered open, dark and glassy, and for a second I swear she looked right through me, as if seeing something beyond this world. Then she drank, a single sip, then another. Her trembling fingers brushed mine as she held the canteen, and I felt something ancient and electric pass between us. When she could finally speak, her voice was a whisper. "You gave me water." "Yes," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "You were hurt. You need to rest." But she shook her head weakly, her gaze locking onto mine. "You gave me water," she repeated more firmly this time, as if those words held weight beyond comprehension. Then, to my utter confusion, she whispered something in a language I didn't know. It sounded melodic, soft but powerful. I asked her name, but she only murmured that same word again. Her eyes closed and I panicked, thinking she'd passed out. I tore a strip from my shirt, wrapped it around her wounded arm, and carried her to the shadow of a nearby boulder. I built a small shelter using my jacket and backpack, doing my best to block the sun. For hours I stayed with her, checking her pulse, watching the rise and fall of her chest. I had no idea who she was, how she ended up there, or if help would ever come. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, silent and unforgiving. As the sky turned from gold to crimson, she stirred again. "The water," she whispered. "You saved me," I smiled faintly. "Anyone would have done the same." Her lips twitched almost in amusement. "Not anyone, only the one chosen by the spirits." I frowned, unsure if I'd misheard. "Chosen?" She nodded weakly. "When a man gives water to a woman near death, he gives part of his life. The spirits see this as a bond. You are my husband now." I blinked at her, certain the heat was making her delirious. That's not how it works," I said softly. "I just helped you." Her expression didn't change. "To you, maybe, but my people have old ways. You gave me life, and life cannot be given without cost." I didn't know what to say. Her eyes held such solemn conviction that I couldn't argue. She wasn't joking. She wasn't feverish, she believed every word. When night came, the desert changed. The wind cooled. Stars spilled across the sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. I built a small fire from dry brush, the flames casting flickering light over her face. She looked peaceful now, asleep beside me, wrapped in my jacket. I should have been thinking about finding help, but I couldn't stop staring at her. There was something haunting about the way she looked, fragile yet unbreakable. She was a part of this land in a way I could never be. Sometime around midnight, she woke again. Her voice was steadier now. "My name is Naya," she said, "daughter of Chief Hassan of the White Mountain Apache." I nodded, relieved she could speak clearly. "I'm Daniel," she studied me quietly. "Daniel," she repeated, as if testing the name on her tongue. "You are far from your people." "So are you," I replied. She smiled faintly but said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt sacred, like the calm that comes after a storm. I wanted to ask her what had happened, why she was alone, why she was bleeding, but something in her eyes warned me not to. Instead, I asked, "What happens now?" She looked toward the stars. "Now we wait for the spirits to decide." I didn't sleep that night. The desert sang around us, the low moan of the wind, the whisper of sand shifting underfoot. I thought about her words, about bonds and spirits and laws I didn't understand. Somewhere deep down, I felt that my life had already changed in ways I couldn't yet see. When dawn came, the horizon blazed with fire and gold. Naya was awake before me, sitting quietly with her face turned toward the rising sun. "You should rest," I said. She shook her head. "The day waits for no one. We must move before the heat returns." I helped her stand, and we began walking toward the east, where I hoped we might find a road, or someone who could help. Her steps were slow but sure. Despite her injuries, she carried herself with dignity, like someone born to endure hardship. As we walked, she told me fragments of her story. Raiders had attacked her village. She'd escaped, wounded, wandering for 2 days before collapsing in the desert. When she saw me approach, she'd thought she was already dead, and that the spirits had sent me to guide her. The more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't afraid. Even in her pain, she had faith in something larger, something ancient. It humbled me. Hours later, we reached the edge of an old dry riverbed. I recognized the shape of tire tracks, fresh ones. Relief washed over me. "We might be close to a road," I said, but before I could move, Naya caught my arm. "Daniel," she said softly, "when we return to my people, they will honor what has been done. You gave me water. You are bound to me." I tried to laugh it off. "I don't think your tribe needs to worry about that. I'm just glad you're alive." Her gaze didn't waver. "You do not understand yet, but you will." And though I didn't believe her then, part of me felt the truth in her words. Something had indeed bound us together, not by choice but by fate. As we crested the hill, I saw a dust cloud in the distance, a truck coming down the old dirt road. Salvation at last. But I didn't realize then that this rescue would not mark the end of my journey. It was only the beginning of something I would never fully be able to explain. The beginning of a bond that neither time, nor distance, nor reason could ever undo. The road appeared like a ghost, an endless stretch of dirt cutting through the desert like a scar. The truck that approached was old, its engine coughing smoke and grit, but at that moment it was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen. I waved my arms, shouting, and the driver slowed down, his eyes wide with surprise as he saw us, 2 figures stumbling out of the wilderness. He was a middle-aged man with sunburned skin and the weathered look of someone who'd lived his life under open skies. "Good Lord," he said, jumping out of the cab. "What happened to you folks?" Before I could answer, Naya swayed on her feet. I caught her just as she began to collapse. "She's hurt," I shouted. "We need to get her to a doctor." He nodded, helping me lift her into the truck bed. As we drove, I poured the last drops from my canteen onto her lips. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and she whispered, "Home," before slipping into unconsciousness again. We drove for nearly an hour, dust trailing behind us until the desert began to give way to a stretch of pine-covered hills. The man pointed ahead. "There's an Apache reservation a few miles from here. If she's one of them, they'll take care of her." When we arrived, a group of people came rushing out of a small medical building, a cluster of wooden structures surrounded by the smell of sage and smoke. They recognized her instantly. "Naya!" one of them cried. A woman in her 50s ran forward, tears streaming down her face. "My brother's child." I helped carry Naya inside. The small clinic smelled of herbs and antiseptic. The nurses worked quickly, cleaning her wounds, giving her fluids, whispering words I couldn't understand. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure whether I should stay or go. Then the older woman approached me. "You found her?" she asked. I nodded. "She was in the desert, hurt and dehydrated. I gave her water and brought her here." The woman's eyes softened, but there was something else behind them, a deep seriousness I couldn't quite name. "You gave her water?" she repeated. "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" She exchanged glances with another woman. Then she turned back to me. "Among our people, that means something. You may not understand now, but you will soon. You should stay until the elders have spoken." I wanted to argue I had no plans of staying, but the way she said it left no room for discussion. So I sat outside the clinic as the sun dipped behind the hills, listening to the murmur of the wind and the distant rhythm of drums. Hours passed before a young man approached me. "The elders wish to see you," he said simply. I followed him to a circular lodge at the center of the village. Inside, a fire burned low, casting flickering light on the faces of 4 men and 2 women seated around it. Their expressions were solemn but not unkind. One of the elders, a tall man with silver hair and a beaded necklace that shimmered like stars, spoke first. "You are Daniel?" "Yes." "You found our daughter in the desert and gave her water?" "That's right," I said, suddenly feeling as if I were being tested. He studied me for a long moment before speaking again. "You should know that in our law, water is sacred. To share it with someone near death is not a small thing. It is a promise, a giving of spirit. When you offered her that water, you gave her a part of your own life, and in doing so you became bound to her." I swallowed hard. "I didn't know. I just wanted to help her." He nodded. "Goodness needs no knowledge of its reward, but our customs remain. What is done cannot be undone." I hesitated. "So, what does that mean exactly?" The elder looked into the fire. "In our way, it means that she is your wife." For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. "Your what?" He met my gaze. "Your wife. By the bond of water, her life and yours are tied. You cannot walk away from that easily." I stared at him in disbelief. "But that's not fair. I didn't ask for this. I didn't know your customs." A woman elder spoke gently. "You are right. You did not know. But you acted with kindness, not for gain. That is why the spirits favor you. This bond is not a punishment, it is a gift." I wanted to argue further, but something in their calm faces silenced me. I had no right to insult their beliefs. Still, the weight of their words pressed heavy on my chest. A wife? A bond? I had only tried to save someone's life. Before I could speak again, the tall elder raised his hand. "You will remain among us for a time. Learn our ways. Understand the meaning of what has happened. Only then can you decide whether to honor or reject the bond." I spent the night in a small guest hut near the edge of the village. Sleep refused to come. Every sound, the whisper of wind through the pines, the distant howl of a coyote, seemed to echo with the same haunting truth. I was no longer just an outsider who had stumbled into their world. I was now a part of something much larger, something I didn't yet understand. The next morning I woke to find Naya standing outside my door. She looked stronger, dressed in clean clothes of soft deerskin, her long black hair loose over her shoulders. Her eyes, dark and deep as the desert night, held mine with quiet intensity. "You stayed," she said. "They asked me to," I replied. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Thanks to you." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the mountains. "The elders have spoken, haven't they?" I nodded. "They said that we're bound. That you and I are husband and wife," she finished, her voice steady. "Yes." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling utterly lost. "Naya, I don't understand any of this." "I didn't mean to—" "You gave water," she interrupted softly. "To us, that is meaning enough." Her tone wasn't accusing, it was serene, almost grateful. But her certainty unnerved me. How could she accept this so easily? I followed her through the village that day, meeting people who greeted her with reverence. Children ran up to her, calling her name. Women smiled and whispered blessings as we passed. Everywhere we went, I could feel their eyes on me. Curious, respectful, yet cautious. Later we sat by the river that ran behind the village. The water glimmered in the sunlight, reflecting the sky in broken fragments. Naya crouched by the edge, dipping her hands into the cool current. "This river is older than our people," she said. "It remembers everything. Every birth, every death, every kindness. When you gave me water, you gave me a part of this memory. That's why it cannot be undone." I knelt beside her. "I don't think I'm the man your tribe wants me to be, Naya. I don't know your ways. I don't belong here." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "Maybe you were never meant to belong to the place you came from. Maybe that's why the spirits brought you here." Her words hit me harder than I expected. There was truth in them, truth I didn't want to admit. My life before this had been hollow in ways I hadn't even recognized until now. That evening, the village held a small ceremony of gratitude for Naya's safe return. Fires burned bright, drums echoed through the air, and the people sang songs that carried into the night. I sat beside Naya, feeling the rhythm pulse through my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel like a stranger. Halfway through the celebration, the elder approached us. He placed a carved wooden bowl filled with water between us and spoke words in Apache. Then he turned to me. "Drink," he said. I hesitated. "What is this?" "A confirmation," he said. "If you drink, you accept the bond. If not, you remain as guest, but the spirits will decide the rest." Naya watched me silently. Her expression was unreadable, neither pleading nor expectant, just patient. My heart pounded. I thought of the desert, of finding her broken and dying in the sand. I thought of her eyes when she drank that first sip of water from my canteen, how it felt like the world itself had shifted. Without another word, I lifted the bowl and drank. The water was cool, pure and alive, as if it carried the soul of the river itself. The elder nodded. "It is done." Cheers rose around us, though I barely heard them. Naya's gaze held mine across the fire. For the first time, I saw something new in her eyes, something softer, warmer. Gratitude. Maybe even hope. That night, as the stars blazed above us, I sat outside my hut staring at the vast sky. I wasn't sure what I had agreed to, not really. But deep down, I knew that my life had crossed a line I could never return from. I had entered a world where kindness was sacred, where water was life, and where love was not chosen, it was destined. And as the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of smoke and earth, I began to understand that sometimes fate doesn't ask. It simply arrives quietly, like the sound of water in a thirsty land. The days that followed were unlike any I had ever lived before. The rhythm of the village became my new heartbeat. Sunrise to sunset, earth to sky, the steady song of wind through the pines, and the quiet dignity of the people who lived in harmony with it. Life moved slower here, but it felt fuller, richer, as if every breath had meaning. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing in two worlds, one foot in the life I had left behind, the other in this strange and sacred one that had claimed me. Naya recovered quickly. The color returned to her cheeks, her steps grew strong, and her laughter, soft but bright, began to fill the air again. Wherever she went, people smiled. She carried an aura of quiet strength, and even when she said nothing, others seemed to listen. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and painted the sky in crimson and gold, Naya came to me carrying a small clay bowl filled with water. The same gesture as before. "You should wash," she said gently. "Tomorrow the elders will call you. The time has come for your test." "My test?" I asked. She nodded. "If you are to remain among us, if you are to keep the bond, you must prove yourself before the spirits. They must see your heart." I laughed nervously. "And how exactly does one prove that?" Her expression didn't change. "By walking where most men fear to go, by listening to what the earth says, and by not running from what you find there." I looked into her eyes, searching for some hint of reassurance. "And if I fail?" She hesitated before answering. "Then the bond will break. You will go back to your world, and I will walk alone again." Her voice trembled just slightly at that last part. Something inside me shifted. I didn't want to be the reason her heart broke again. That night, I lay awake listening to the distant chant of the drums. The stars above the desert burned brighter than I'd ever seen. Thousands of points of light, ancient and unmoving, as if watching. I felt small beneath them, but not insignificant. The next morning, before dawn, the elders came for me. They painted my face with lines of white clay and ash, symbols that represented life, death, and rebirth. The tall elder, Chief Hosan, I now knew, placed his hand on my shoulder. You will walk into the canyons, he said. You will go alone. You will take no food, no fire, only water. If the spirits deem you worthy, they will guide you home. If not, you will know. Naya stood nearby, her face calm but her eyes full of worry. As I turned to leave, she pressed something into my hand, a small piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a droplet. For protection, she said softly, so you will never forget what binds us. I nodded, unable to speak, and walked into the rising dawn. The journey into the canyon was harsh. The heat came early, baking the red stone until it shimmered like metal. My boots kicked up dust that clung to my skin, and the silence pressed on me like a weight. The path twisted downward between towering cliffs, streaked with veins of gold and rust. Hours passed. I drank sparingly from my canteen, remembering the sacredness of water here. Each sip felt like a prayer. By midday, exhaustion began to set in. The heat blurred my vision and shadows seemed to shift and move at the corners of my eyes. Once, I thought I heard someone whisper my name, soft as a sigh. I turned quickly, but there was no one there, only the whisper of wind brushing against stone. Then as I stumbled through a narrow pass, I saw something glimmering ahead, a pool of clear, still water tucked into a hollow of rock. Relief surged through me. I ran forward, kneeling beside it, ready to drink. But as I reached out, a voice echoed behind me. "Do you take what is not offered?" I froze. The voice was deep, ageless, not quite human. I turned and saw an old man standing in the shadows of the canyon wall. His hair was white as snow, his skin weathered and dark, his eyes the color of storm clouds. He carried no staff, no bag, just a calm that felt heavier than the mountains themselves. I'm sorry, I stammered. I thought this water is life, he interrupted. And life is never free. You have taken once, and it bound you. Will you take again without knowing the cost? I didn't understand, but his gaze was piercing, almost painful. I only wanted to survive. He stepped closer, the sound of his footsteps like sand whispering. Survival is not living, Daniel of the Outsiders. You gave life. You must now understand what it means to carry it. Before I could respond, the old man pointed toward the pool. Look. I turned and gasped. The water's surface had changed. It no longer reflected the canyon above, but showed images. Naya, sitting by the fire, waiting. Children running through the village, the elder chanting before a circle of stones. And then, darkness. A storm. The village in flames. I jerked back. What is this? The path of your choice, the old man said. If you stay, you take her burdens as your own. If you leave, she carries them alone. I stared into the water again, heart pounding. The images shifted. Naya looking up at me, her eyes full of sorrow, whispering, You gave me water. When I looked up, the old man was gone. I blinked, shaken. The canyon was silent again, empty except for the rustle of wind. For a long moment, I just stood there trying to understand what had happened. Finally, I knelt and cupped a handful of the water. I didn't drink. Instead, I poured it onto the earth. If life isn't free, I said quietly, then let this be my offering. As the drops hit the ground, I felt a breeze sweep through the canyon, cool and soft, like a sigh of approval. When I finally found my way back to the village 3 days later, I was thinner, sunburned, and exhausted, but alive. The people gathered as I approached. Some smiled, others bowed their heads in silent respect. Naya was waiting near the fire. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. She ran to me and took my hands, her touch trembling. The spirits let you return, she whispered. You listened. I nodded slowly. I saw things I can't explain. She smiled faintly. You don't need to explain. You only need to understand. That evening, the elders called another gathering. The firelight flickered across their faces as Chief Hosan stood. "The spirits have spoken," he said. "This man has faced their test and has not turned away. The bond of water stands true." A cheer rose from the people, soft but joyful. Naya's hand found mine, and I felt a calm wash over me, a peace I hadn't known in years. Later, after the ceremony ended and the stars filled the sky, Naya and I sat together by the river. The moon reflected off the water like a silver path stretching into forever. "You didn't have to come back," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," I replied. "You said the bond can't be broken. Maybe I didn't believe that before. But now, I do." She turned to me, her eyes shining. "Then you understand." "I think I do," I said. "It's not about being husband and wife. It's about connection. About life shared." Naya smiled, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The sound of the river was enough. As the night deepened, I realized something I hadn't before. The bond wasn't a burden. It wasn't a mistake. It was a gift. A reminder that sometimes a single act of kindness can ripple outward, touching lives we never meant to change. The next morning the sun rose clear and golden over the hills. The village stirred to life, children laughing, women singing, the smell of wood smoke curling through the air. And as I stood there beside Naya, watching the light break across the land, I felt something deep inside me settle into place. I had found where I belonged, not by blood, not by heritage, but by heart. The summer heat had grown fierce, baking the desert until the very air shimmered. The mountains stood still watching, as if they sensed something stirring beneath the surface of the days, an unease that neither the elders nor the winds could name. Weeks had passed since my trial in the canyon. The people now called me Water Giver, and though I still felt like an outsider at times, I was no longer treated as one. I worked alongside the hunters, mended roofs, learned the songs of the river, and even began to speak a little of their language. Life, in its quiet way, had become good, steady, filled with small joys. Naya, too, had changed. Her laughter returned in full, and with it came a lightness that lifted everyone around her. She had begun teaching the children the stories of her ancestors, sitting with them by the fire and showing them how the stars told their own legends. And every night before sleep, she would whisper prayers to the wind, words I didn't always understand, but somehow always felt. Yet even peace has a way of trembling when the storm draws near. It began one evening when a scout returned to the village, his horse foaming and his breath ragged. He spoke quickly to Chief Hosan, and though I couldn't understand all the words, I could read the fear in his eyes. Something was wrong. The chief's voice, calm but firm, echoed through the camp. "The riders come again." A chill ran through me. I remembered the men who had hunted Naya when I first found her, soldiers, desperate and cruel, the ones who saw her people as ghosts standing in the way of their new world. Within hours, the village became a storm of movement. Warriors readied their bows and rifles, women gathered the children, and the elders began lighting torches in a circle, chanting to call the protection of the spirits. The scent of burning sage filled the air. Naya found me near the storage huts, her face pale but steady. "They come for us," she said. "For what is left of us." I gripped her hand. "Then we'll fight." Her eyes met mine, soft, sad, resolute. "You are not one of us, Daniel. You could leave and no one would blame you." "I gave you water," I said quietly, "and you gave me life. I'm not leaving." For a moment, something flickered across her face, part grief, part love, part something deeper that had no name. She nodded once. "Then we face it together." The first gunshots came just before dawn. The soldiers rode in from the east, their silhouettes black against the rising sun. They came fast, shouting, firing into the air. Horses screamed. Children cried. Smoke rose as the first huts caught fire. Chaos. I grabbed Naya's arm, pulling her toward the cliffs where the others were fleeing, but she stopped, pointing toward the elders' lodge. "Chief Hosan is still inside." The building was already burning, flames licking up the dry wood. I could hear the old man's voice inside, coughing, shouting something I couldn't make out. Without thinking, I ran toward it. "Daniel, no!" Naya screamed. The heat hit me like a wall. Smoke burned my throat and eyes, but I pushed through, ducking low, searching. The fire roared around me, swallowing the room in light and shadow. Then I saw him, Hosan, pinned beneath a fallen beam. His breath came in short, broken gasps. I grabbed the beam, straining. It didn't move. I tried again, muscles screaming. "Hold on!" I shouted. "I've got you." But it was no use, and the weight was too much. The roof groaned above us, ash falling like snow. The old man's hand reached for mine. "Leave me," he rasped. "You must protect her." "The water must flow," I shook my head violently. "I won't leave you." His grip tightened, surprisingly strong. "Do not fear the ending. Fear forgetting why you began." Then the roof cracked. Flames rushed downward, swallowing the room. I pulled, desperate, one last time, and somehow the beam shifted. I dragged him free, half carrying, half dragging him through the smoke until we burst out into the open air. The others saw us and ran to help. Naya fell to her knees beside the chief, tears streaking her ash-stained cheeks. Hosan looked up at me, a faint smile crossing his burned lips. "You listened," he whispered, and then softly he was gone. Naya's cry broke through the noise, raw, unguarded. She pressed her forehead to the old man's hand, whispering prayers that trembled like leaves. Around us the fire raged, the battle still echoing through the hills. We had no time to grieve. I pulled her up. "We have to move." We ran, through smoke, through gunfire, through the cries of the wounded. We joined a group of survivors heading toward the canyon. The path was narrow and the soldiers were close behind. Bullets whined through the air, striking the rocks around us. At one point, a young boy stumbled and fell. Without thinking, I scooped him up and carried him the rest of the way. His tiny arms clung to my neck, his tears mixing with sweat and soot. By the time we reached the high cliffs, half the village lay in ruins behind us. The smoke rose like a black pillar against the brightening sky. We took shelter in a cave hidden among the rocks. There were about 30 of us, mostly women, children, and the wounded. Naya moved among them, tending to burns, washing wounds, whispering words of strength. Her hands never stopped shaking, but her voice never broke. I watched her, awe and sorrow twisting together inside me. That night, as the others slept fitfully, I found her sitting at the cave's mouth, staring out at the valley below. The fire still glowed faintly in the distance. She spoke without looking at me. "He was the last of the old ones," she said softly. "Now the songs belong to us." I sat beside her. "He died saving everyone. You kept them together," she shook her head. "I did nothing. You carried him from the fire. You gave us hope again." I hesitated, then said, "He told me something, before he died. He said, 'Fear forgetting why you began.'" Naya turned to me, her eyes dark and full of reflected firelight. "Do you know why you began, Daniel?" I thought for a long time before answering. I thought it was just kindness, giving a wounded girl water. But now I think it was more. Maybe I was the one dying that day, and you were the water. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of wind through the canyon. Then slowly she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Then we saved each other," she said quietly. I wrapped my arm around her and held her there as the desert wind sang its low,
eternal song. The next morning we buried Chief Hosan in the canyon.
The women sang as the men covered his body with earth and stones, their voices echoing off the cliffs in haunting, beautiful harmony. When the last stone was laid, Naya stepped forward and poured a handful of water from her bowl over the grave. The droplets shimmered in the sun, falling like tears. "For life," she whispered, "and for the bond that never dies." Later, as the survivors began rebuilding what they could, I stood looking over the ruins of the village. Everything we had built and every hut, every memory lay in ashes. Yet somehow I didn't feel despair, because I knew that what mattered most had survived. That evening, Naya came to me with the turquoise droplet I had carried since my test. She took it from my hand and tied it around my wrist with a strip of woven cloth. "You have carried it for protection," she said. "Now it carries you. Wherever you go, you will never walk alone." Her words settled deep in my chest, heavy and sacred. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in gold and crimson, we stood together, two souls bound not by law or blood, but by something older and purer, and in that fading light, I understood what the old man had meant. Life is never free. It demands courage and sometimes pain, but if given freely, if shared, it becomes eternal. That night, before sleep claimed me, I made a silent promise that I would not let their songs be forgotten. that I would carry them, the names, the stories, the spirit of their kindness, wherever life led me next. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried back a whisper, soft like a prayer, as if the spirits themselves had heard. The first cold winds of autumn came early that year, brushing through the canyons and whispering across the ashes of what had once been our home. Smoke no longer rose from the ruins, only the quiet hum of rebuilding, a rhythm of hammers of songs, of hands working together to remind the earth that life always returns. In the weeks that followed the fire, I began to see how deeply loss could shape a people, not by breaking them but by binding them closer. The survivors of the Apache village refused to vanish. They gathered stone and wood, built new shelters along the river, and sang prayers for every soul that had passed. Their grief did not silence them. It gave them purpose, and through it all, Naya remained their heart. Each morning she stood by the riverbank and spoke to the water, her voice low and melodic. I never understood all her words, but I could feel their weight. It was as if she spoke not only to her ancestors but to the world itself, promising it that they were still here, still alive, still whole. Sometimes she would turn and smile at me, her hair moving with the wind, and I would forget for a moment that I had ever belonged to another world. Still, there were days when I felt the pull of that old life, the world beyond the desert, beyond the red canyons and open sky. I would think of the sound of engines, the noise of towns, the rhythm of people who never looked up to see the stars. It felt like another life entirely, one I could no longer fit into. One night, as the fire crackled low, I told Naya of this feeling. I keep thinking about what comes next, I said. Your people. They have a future here, but me, I don't know what I am anymore. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the firelight. You are the man who gave water to the dying, she said softly. You are the man who walked with the spirits. The world you came from, it cannot take that away. I shook my head. But what if it calls me back? Her smile was sad but calm. Then you will go. The river flows in many directions, but it always remembers its source. Her words lingered in me long after she spoke them. Over the next few weeks, the seasons shifted. The trees along the river began to yellow, their leaves drifting across the surface like scattered prayers. The air grew colder, the nights longer. The people began preparing for winter, storing grain, weaving new blankets, singing the old songs by the fire. One evening, Chief Hosan's son, now the new leader, gathered the tribe for a ceremony. It was to honor the dead and to bless those who had survived. We stood in a wide circle beneath the open sky. The fire in the center burned tall and bright, its sparks rising like stars. The elders chanted and the children tossed handfuls of wildflowers into the flames. When it was my turn, I stepped forward with Naya beside me. She carried a small bowl of river water. This water, she said aloud, her voice clear, was given once in kindness. It became a bond, then a promise, and now a blessing. She looked at me and I nodded. Together we poured the water into the fire. It hissed softly, releasing a puff of steam that curled upward, glowing in the light. The people murmured words of thanks, not to me, but to the spirits that had guided us. Still, I felt a deep peace settle inside me. For the first time, I understood fully what it meant to give without needing to own, to love without needing to keep. That night, after the ceremony, I sat alone by the river. The stars above were sharp and endless. Their reflection in the water made it seem like the heavens had spilled into the earth. And in that shimmering silence, I felt it, a pull, soft but certain, like the current calling a branch that had drifted too far downstream. When I returned to the hut, Naya was waiting. She didn't need to ask. She already knew. You're leaving, she said quietly. I nodded. For a while. There are others out there. People who don't know what I've seen. They don't know that kindness can change a life or that water can bind souls. Her eyes glistened. You want to tell them. I need to, I said. If your songs are to live, they must travel. She was silent for a moment, then stepped closer. Then promise me something, Daniel. Promise me that when you speak of us, you will not tell a story of sorrow. Tell a story of love, of how a man gave water to a stranger and in doing so found the meaning of life. I took her hands in mine. I promise. The next morning, the village gathered to see me off. They gave me a horse, food, and a small pouch of river sand. So you never forget where your heart learned to listen, one of the women said. Naya stood apart from the others, by the river's edge. I walked to her slowly, my chest heavy. She held something wrapped in cloth. "This is yours," she said, handing it to me. I unwrapped it and found a carved wooden bowl, the same one I had first used to give her water. "It's cracked," I said, tracing the line down its side. She smiled faintly. "So are we all. But we still hold what matters." I couldn't speak. My throat burned with unshed tears. Finally, I said, "How will I find you again?" Her answer was soft. "Follow the rivers. They will always lead you home." I wanted to say more, but she pressed her fingers to my lips, silencing me. Then she leaned forward and placed a single kiss against my forehead. A blessing, not a goodbye. "Go with the wind," she whispered. And so I did.